Welcome to the Executive Innovation Show podcast, where we bring you real executive conversations with industry game changers and thought leaders. We ask the questions you're thinking, what you're scared to ask, and we make your brain hurt afterward. With your host, Carrie Chitsey, co-founder and CEO of One Touch Video Chat, live video interviews, and the nonprofit Humans Helping Humans.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's podcast. We have a great podcast ahead of us today. We're going to be talking about high-growth hiring pains, brought to you by livevideointerviews.com. And we have two great lady guests. I love women roundtables. We're all matching today. This was not color coordinated. We've got the reds, we've got the pinks. We're all good. Our first guest on us, we have Gelena Sachs, who's the VP of People at Ridecell. She's a leader and change agent on best practices and leading companies to Fortune's best places to work. She really is a champion for empathy and kindness and on a mission to transform the world of work. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Excited to be here.
Great. And we have Deborah Moroz, who is the Chief Human Resources Officer at Health-Ade Kombucha, who is a senior HR leader, specializes in supporting organizations through change, including fast times of growth. She's also a trusted culture guru and HR expert witness in employment law practices, serving as foundation for emphasis in litigation prevention and compliance. And she's also working on a new book that's coming out on how to realize an ideal corporate culture. Deborah, welcome.
Thank you so much. Appreciate this opportunity.
Well, great, ladies. We're going to get started and want to kind of frame this. I think it goes a lot times unnoticed that SMB and mid-sized companies really account for 99.7% of U.S. companies, which are under 100 employees and over 50% of actual workforce. And we talk a lot on the show with chief people officers, CHROs, and everybody has hiring pains. But I think when we talk about mid-sized companies, high-growth companies, those hiring pains are a lot of times escalated because you don't track hiring costs as much in mid-sized organizations as you do big companies, know it down to the penny. But it definitely is a higher hiring cost because you have more executives that you're pulling away, or you have more managers that you're pulling away. And bad hires cost way more because you've now spent all this time and money on training and new people to speed, and really kind of set you back. Assisting costs more. And at the end of the day, there's, kind of less budget, less technology, maybe not as fine-tuned process as some bigger organizations. So with kind of framing that all in, I really want to talk, you guys, both your companies are going through, high growth, you're doing great things, you're hiring fast, you're going through it, and a lot of that comes with some growing pains. So I want to talk a little bit about that. And the first question I have for you guys is, I've got three kind of things that I want to know from each of you of what right now kind of in your life is harder and why. So if you had to pick, and I know it's hard to pick things, so if you had to pick, and Gelena, we'll go with you first. What's harder for you right now? Sifting through all these resumes you're getting, my new kind of ATS cramming resumes and kind of sifting through those job boards, or is really kind of the recruitment process and really kind of defining that, and adherence would be the second one. And the last one is really trying to figure out kind of the right combination of digital technology, human interaction, and what to use to really kind of augment your process, maybe help out with some of that. Which one right now is kind of a bigger pain point for you?
I think given where we are today and how we ramped up, I think ensuring that there's a really solid and consistent recruiting process, and that it's an impeccable process internally, but we also give the candidate a really seamless experience as well as they're going through the interview, making sure that the managers are adhering to it, making sure that people are following, and that we get rid of some of the biases potentially as we're bringing people in. That's been somewhat of a pretty big challenge for us, but also really great opportunity. So that's definitely something that's become more of challenge as we grow, because as you have more people coming in, you've got to get more people acclimated and onboarded in terms of understanding, great, how do we recruit here at Ridecell? And it's going to be different than it was probably the companies they've been in the past. So,
right. Yeah. Good. And what about you, Deborah?
I really appreciate this question, because the most important thing we can do is hire elite talent. And so I don't know that any one of those stands out for me as a pain point, but I agree that the process we establish and maintain has to be set up so that we, i.e. all of those who are interviewing and involved in that hiring decision, are making the very best decision and attracting the very best candidate for the position.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. And so that brings up the next thing is, I know both of you are really passionate about culture, and with the lowest kind of unemployment rate we've seen and candidates driving the market and kind of decisions, and especially in mid-sized organizations, company culture is critical, and you get a couple bad apples and you can kill an entire department. Deborah, you guys are doing something really cool on the culture side, where either you or one of the founders do a culture interview with every hire, which a lot of companies, smaller companies are doing that. But as you start to scale, it gets a little bit harder to do that. Tell us a little bit about why that's so important for you guys, and really what you're looking for in that interview. That's kind of the, red or green light to the next round.
Yeah. So one thing that has supported Health-Ade's achievement during these times of fast growth is having what we call a culture interview. So what we're looking for is values alignment. So in our case, our values are grit, optimism, authenticity, and leadership at every single level. So we have crafted questions that will elicit a response to help us figure out if this person will indeed be aligned with that overall value system. The other thing we're looking at, or I'm looking at, since I'm the one who does most of these, is for me, I talk a lot about killing the ego at work.
Yeah.
Professional, one of the things that we're always trying to avoid is spending a lot of time dealing with challenging employees, people who are not performing, or blaming others. So I'm always looking for somebody who is not going to blame others and who's going to make mistakes valuable.
Great. And Gelena, on your side, hiring technical talent, there's obviously, base technical assessments and trying to figure out, are they really a great developer, or, what those skills are. But culture, especially, in your area, is very critical too, and putting somebody on that team. What comes first for you and why?
That's a great question. We are about 50% technical talent. And so it's super important for us and essential that we're hiring people who are a really good cultural add for us. I don't use the word cultural fit specifically, because I feel like we have a tendency to hire sometimes like-minded people who really think like we do. And so I really push our managers and our leadership to think about what's the cultural add, how are the gaps going to be filled that I have, and what's going to complement me. And we do actually as well do a cultural interview on the front end. We have learned our lesson and are doing that in parallel with the technical assessment to make sure that the person has values alignment for us. We have values that are very hard because they're stretch values. They're not like respect and honesty and partnership. Our values are like obstacles the way. Teamwork makes the dream work. True north, right? Making decisions that are for the infinite versus the finite. when we think about our growth and our capability in the market. So tech talent is super important to assess for cultural ad, and making sure that as you're adding that talent, they are enhancing and propelling you forward, versus just kind of, that takes you to a much higher level long term. So we tend to do that on, I would say, first round of interviews. And we have cultural champions. We have cultural champions that do that for us. So it's not just on the people team, my team, but also within other parts of the business.
That's great. And I know both of you are hiring workforces that aren't, in just a single location. You're expanding to other states. You're doing work from home. You're doing all those kind of things. How has that been? We live in this world now where we want that flexible workforce. People want to be able to work from home or work from different locations. How is that, are you having centralized HR doing, video interviews remotely? Do you have HR in individual locations? How are you kind of feeling out those kind of best practices and how to really scale? A lot of people are going through those pains right now where you can't afford to have HR in each area, and you've got to figure out, how to still embrace those culture questions, how to embrace that, but do it in the first way. Gelena, we'll start with you and on that one.
Sure. We actually are looking to localize our people function by region, and have that, I would say, infrastructure support regionally our growth. So for example, we are expanding into, or I would say growing a ton in Asia Pacific right now. And so our first operations were in Pune in India. So we've hired a really strong team there then to help us expand into other areas in Asia. And it is again, making sure that you can localize to the culture. So even though we have Ridecell culture, as you're growing internationally, you have to be able to adhere and localize for the norms of that specific region, that specific country. And so we do a lot of work around making sure that our culture is translated appropriately to the different areas that we're going into.
Yeah, that's a very good point. As you go into different countries, you got to keep the same values, but then apply them to the originating country. So yeah, that's good. And then what about you guys, Deborah?
Yeah, I mean, I always prefer an in-person interview if we can. We're in Health-Ades in 8 different states. So at some point or another, the likelihood is we're going to fly somebody to, the corporate HQ to meet in person. But we also do video interviews and a lot of stuff over the phone.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great. And as you guys are growing, as you're adding more people to your HR teams, I'm sure, budgets go up, but I'm sure they're not, increasing at as rapid rate as everybody would like to love. And you don't have all the best expensive tools at your disposal, and you have to kind of work smarter, work leaner, things like that. If you had to give some advice to others that are listening, they're kind of in the same boat where they're in this high growth and they're trying to kind of figure out, without going through, kind of names of vendors and all that fun stuff, what are some things that you keep kind of in your toolkit that helps you or your team kind of get through some of this? Deborah?
HR is both a strategic and tactical function. So on the tactical side, when I'm talking to fast growth, small startup HR teams, I really encourage them to keep things organized from the get-go. And you can do that without a big technology budget, through Excel or Google Docs or, some basic stuff. But the faster things happen and the quicker the organization grows, the harder it is to get a handle on that stuff. And it can take on a disorganized life of its own. So the same thing with accounting teams, both HR and accounting, just keep it tight from the get-go. And there's just so many free tools to do that now.
Yeah, that's so true. And Gelena, what about you?
Yeah, I agree with Deb on this. I think if you can keep things simple and elegant and not overcomplicate your process and really understand at the core what you're trying to hire for, what problem you're trying to solve with bringing in this new top talent, that's key. And keeping that organization is going to really take you leaps and bounds ahead. I think the other thing from a tools perspective that I think has served me well in the startup world, and also that I, as I'm advising other startups, is getting a really robust ATS. One that's super easy, super simple, can do high volume hiring for you. Because when you are going through such a high growth spurt, it's so amazing when things can get automated and things move so much quicker through the process. And I think the hiring managers get very involved in it because they feel like things are moving. The recruiting team is really, having a lot of things shifted off of their plates tactically. So if you are going through high growth, I highly recommend looking at some really good tools that'll help you propel that forward to automate some of the day-to-day tactical.
Great. And one of the other things we hear a lot about is, companies, when they had one location, when they were first started out, they had this really amazing culture. The founders were kind of right there. There was, they felt in the loop. The communication was great. And then when that scale started happening, a lot of that started breaking down. Deborah, you're writing a book on culture, so no better person to ask than you. What are 3 things that people should really think about as they experience these growth, this high growth, on how to really scale that culture and make sure it stays, grows with the organization?
Yeah, so the 3 things I would encourage any fast growth startup to hold on closely to are 1, compliance. So believe it or not, if you think about it, if men and women, for example, are not paid the same, we're not going to have an ideal culture, right? And equal pay is a law. So if employees don't feel like the employer is complying with federal and state employment laws, you're not going to have an ideal culture. Or sexual harassment, right? So that's number 1. Number 2 is the fish rots from the head. So if we do not have strong leadership in every department, we're not going to realize an ideal culture. Yeah. And then 3, we talked about this earlier, is creating in a grassroots way, not top down, a value system that inspires people to behave in a way that gives them meaning and purpose. So to that end also, so having a vision, mission, value set that is authentically held from tip to tail, from, in every position. That's the beginning of the infrastructure that's needed to create and maintain an ideal culture.
Great. And Gelena, I know culture is important to you. Is there anything that sticks out that Deborah hasn't, some other things on culture that resonates with you on scaling?
I think it's kind of understanding that it's not just the HR function that's responsible for creating culture and everyone tends to consume it. It's actually, we're all responsible for generating it.
That's a great point.
As you think about the values and the mission and vision, to Deb's point, we as leaders have to role model it and be able to be kind of the top purveyors, but everybody is a leader in their own right, and they should be able to create that as well. So that's how I think about it. I think if you're really wanting to scale that culture, and if you're going from, let's say, 100 people to over 4,000 people in 2 years, or whatever that magic number looks like for you, everybody's got to have a part in it. Everybody's got to be percolating on it and holding each other accountable. That's the big one for me, is saying, hey, this is not on our values. As we're working through something, if something's not feeling right, and it's not on values, saying, hey, you know what? I don't feel like this is on our values. Let's talk about it. I think if you hold each other accountable and you create that psychological safety for people to do that, it takes you leaps and bounds in terms of making sure that your culture continues to be healthy And it'll evolve over time. It's not going to be the same. I think also acknowledging that it's not going to be the same with 4,000 people as it is with 100 people, but it still can be incredibly impactful and inspiring for your company.
Yeah, that's great. So the last thing that I want to talk about that we get a lot of kind of questions on is, as you're going through these high growth hiring pains, you typically, it's really hard, especially in these competitive markets, to compete with these big companies that are doing signing bonuses, or they have amazing benefits, and they have all these amazing perks, and all these free breakfast, lunch, dinner, all these great environments. How have you really, for your groups, how have you tried to have that competitive advantage without having to keep up with the Benjamins, these bigger companies? Because a lot of times, a lot of folks feel kind of like, they're starting off behind the eight ball here, because they don't have this whole package to be able to give people in certain markets. How do you think about that, or how have you kind of paved through some of those issues?
Yeah. So I think that employees today want to learn, they want to grow, they want to flourish, and they want career growth. So, or career advancement. So one thing that has really worked well for Health-Ade is being able to offer, because of the growth, to offer enormous learning opportunities. Yeah. And that becomes a pillar of our professional brand, or has become a part of what we're known for in the industry and in the area. So people who are really interested in getting that kind of fast growth learning experience are attracted to a place like Health-Ade.
And you get free Health-Ade all day, right?
All day. Free food all day.
Well, I mean, I would lead with that. I mean, if I was hiring, that's where I'd be leading with. And Gelena, what about you?
For us at Ridecell, we are on the cutting edge of the new mobility space, and for people who are excited about paving the way here and having a purpose and having a mission that's larger than themselves, they're really excited about Ridecell. I think for us, we also make sure that people have opportunities for growth. To Deb's point, I just hired a director of learning and development that I am super excited about, to put in some great leadership initiatives in place and create a culture of learning. That's the number one thing I think people are seeking. And I agree with Deb on that. We also do, we kind of thought about, okay, how do we think about these perks and what's important for people, right? For me, right, as we're looking at a total rewards package, as we're looking to bring in this talent, I want to make sure people have a safety net, right? When you think about benefits, when you think about, those things to me are a lot more important when somebody falls than catered lunches, even though we have catered lunches, right? And I think you have to make sure you understand what people's intrinsic and extrinsic motivations are, right? For joining an organization is going to be different. But I think a lot of it is really making sure that people understand that they have an opportunity to leave Ridecell better than they did coming in.
Yeah, I think that's critical.
And that's my big mission on it, is as we're hiring people, making sure they feel they learn, they grow, they evolve, and always, yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I always say that, we teach so many people around here that then you can't afford them, because then they leave and get such a better job. It's great to see it happen, but you move them right out. Well, great. So our last question that we always ask on the podcast is, what is keeping you up at night? And outside of kids, outside of husbands, HR related. So if we could just go around and two things that kind of keep you up at night. Deborah, I'm guessing from the attorney, it's going to be legal related. So we'll start with you.
I see how you would think that, but actually to me, that's kind of on the easier side of things. What does keep me up at night is making sure that employees are finding meaning and purpose.
Great.
And balance and it, really thriving in their individual roles and on their teams, and also that we're always hitting our goals. That is really what I think about a lot.
Awesome. I'm shocked there was no compliance in that way.
In California too.
I know. Every attorney, their number one's compliance. So. All right, Gelena, you?
For me, I think there's not a lot that keeps me up at night. I have a really strong team, which I'm thankful and grateful for. The thing that does keep me up is that our industry that we're in moves more in a day than some industries move in a year.
Yeah.
It is so high paced that it's just making sure people have a time to breathe. Yeah. People have balance. People feel joy and happiness doing what they're doing. Have a moment to appreciate each other. We have a huge internal initiative around daily appreciations, because we are sometimes just going through the motions and things don't always get noticed, not intentionally, but unintentionally.
Yeah.
And so I want to make sure that sometimes we bring everything back together to make sure that people feel fulfilled. Yeah. That coming to work isn't a chore. Coming to work is not a job. It's a passion. It's something that inspires them on a day-to-day, and this is what they love. We spend way too much of our time at work, 90%, and I want to make sure people feel like they, they're growing, they're learning, they're happy, they're healthy, they're joyful, and that's our job on the HR front, to make sure that we make that come to life.
Well, that's awesome. Well, ladies, it has been so great to have you both on the show. For everybody listening, you can follow Health-Ade at Drink Health-Ade, and you can follow Gelena and Rideshare at Rideshare. Ridecell at Ridecell. And you can follow both of these ladies, their companies, the journeys that they're going through. Feel free, if you have any questions for either guest today, feel free to submit those questions. We'll happily get you responses to that. And make sure you subscribe and share this amazing show so you can get your shows delivered to you on a weekly basis. Ladies, it has been such a pleasure to have you both here today. Thanks so much for all your amazing insights. Such great insights you shared today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
This podcast has come to a close. To hear more from the Executive Innovation Show podcast, subscribe, submit questions, and share the love. Follow us on social. We're everywhere.